Excellent. Now let's get cracking on our submenus. Okay, so what we're going to do first, we are going to get rid of display none, and when I do that you can see, it looks terrible. Although, look at that. Already when we hover over it, our sort of breadcrumb colouring of the menus and their parent menu items and their when you hover over a child menu item is working, which is good. I may not explain that very well just then, but if you watch the other tutorial you would understand, and as we get further into this you'll see what I mean. Anyway, so first thing we're going to do, we are going to set the position of our submenus to absolute. This will allow us to position them relative to their parents. As you can see up here, we set the position to relative, so our submenus will immediately get the parent positions of their parents. If we didn't set this to relative, it would get the position of the nearest relative parent, which in our case would be the body tag. So that's not good. So if we refresh now, oops, if we save and refresh, you can see that all our submenus are getting the X, Y, the top and left positions of our parents instead of jumping all to the top right hand corner, left hand corner, which they would do if we got rid of this relative, or I believe they would do. I don't think they would jump anywhere else. Oh no, they all just go in a heap in the middle for some reason. That's weird. Still, we want to have that in there because we need to position them relative to their parents, which is what we want to do. Excellent. So next we are going to set the left position to about 14 pixels, the top position to 95%, and give some padding on the top of about 13 pixels. This will be useful later. And we'll actually get rid of the background, so set that to none. And we'll also give it a width of 150 pixels. Excellent. So now if we refresh, as you can see, all our text is in white, so we can't actually see them properly. But if I hover over it, you can see, or if I hit Control A, you can see they are actually there. Good. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to actually style our list items so we can see our list items. So next thing we're going to do is go to nav under unordered list, list items, get our sub list and grab our list items. So what we're going to do, we're going to give these some padding of 0px, 0 pixels, 3 pixels and another 3 pixels, and we're going to give it a background color which is actually the same as our unordered list background color up here. Okay, and we're going to set their width to 100% so they fill out that 150 pixels. So now if I refresh, you can see each list item now has a background which creates one coherent background, which is good. Okay, next thing we want to do is actually curve the top and bottom corners of our list. If you see here, the corners are curved. So to do that, we need to get the first list item and the last list item and curve their corners respectively. So for the first list item, we want the top right and top left corners. I did that the wrong way around. Top right and top left corners, there we go. And for the last list item, we want the bottom right and bottom left corners as well. And that's very easy to do. In fact, we'll do it before we actually style our list item, just to make sure nothing is overridden by this. Or, yeah, we want this to override the styles that come before it. And since we won't be affecting any of these styles anyway, it's fine. But we'll do it just to make sure. So we do nav, ULLI, get our first child using that prefix. And we can do border dash radius, and we'll set the top right and top left borders to border radiuses to 0, 4px and 4px, and the others to 0. And then we can actually copy and paste this, change you to be last child, And we just want to swap these over, so I'm just going to cut and paste these just like that. So now if we refresh, you can see we have curved, slightly curved corners there. Excellent. Everything is going well. Now we want to style our anchor tags and make them look all nice. So we're going to go nav, unordered list item, get the child list, unordered list and list items, and get their anchor tags. So we're going to set the display to block, and then we're going to give them some padding of about 6 pixels top and bottom and 9 pixels left and right, and give them a border radius of about 2 pixels. And we're also going to change their font size to 14 pixels, because at the moment they are getting the 18 pixel font size we set up here for our main navigation, but that is a bit too big. So now if we refresh, you can see, there we go, a lot nicer and a lot smaller. Next thing we want to do is change their hover events. So at the moment they've got the same hover events as their parent on the main menu, but we don't want that. If we come over here, you can see instead of changing the text color, we change the background color. And that's again very easy to do. If we come over to our code, all we have to do is override our previous hover code, but without actually changing the parent. We're going to change the child styling. So we just add in our nav, unordered list item, and then child, unordered list item, anchor tag. And then we want to add the hover for list item, and if in here if we set the color to white, so the color won't be changing, we're overriding our parent color, and we'll actually set the background to the same color we used for the text up here. And I'm just going to copy and paste that and do the same for the list item with a class of active. There we go. And just change our background color here. So now if we refresh our actual code, you can see when we hover over, it's working good. And you'll notice that when we hover over it, it's affecting all the child ones as well. And it's very simple to fix that. All we need to do is, instead of getting every anchor tag, we get the direct descendant, so the direct child, using our what is that? That's less than? Yeah, that's the less than symbol. Our less than. And if we refresh, you can see it doesn't affect all the children, which is what we want. Good. Now, I'm sure you're screaming, but wait, I want to see them. I want to see them like fade in and out. We'll get to that. Fear not. First, I want to get them all positioned perfectly. So now we're going to position our sub-menus. And that's very easy as well. We're just going to comment out a new area. So sub-menu. Just like that. And we're going to grab our sub-menus, which involves a lot more grabbing of child list items and unordered lists. So first thing we need to do is get our nav, our unordered list, and our list items, then get the sub unordered list and our unordered list item. Again, get the child of our submenu. So the submenu unordered list. Oh, just like that. And we're now going to change its positioning a bit. So first thing we're going to do is set top to 0 and set left to let's say 100. Actually, I would just do 100% for the time being. So I'm trying to read this off my other screen, and my Mac screen is getting in the way of my other screen. Okay, and we're going to stick some padding. We're first actually going to set all the padding to 0, and then we're going to add some padding to the left of 13 pixels. Again, I'll tell you what this is for later. And that should be it. So now if we refresh, you can see it's all pushed over to the side, which is what we want. Good. Now then, let's add, before we do anything else, we're going to add these little arrows, which is pure CSS, which is absolutely awesome. I love the fact that we can do that. Look at that. Look at them little arrows. They just make it look so cool. Okay, now the way that works is this is actually a border. And you remember when I mentioned before we used after here to add the Clearfix, which is basically adding an extra bit of content into our page without us having to write it in the HTML? Well, essentially we're going to do that, but instead of after, we are going to set it before. So before our list item, we are going to add a little element with the borders to make it look like an arrow. So how do we do that? Well, it's very simple. We're going to do it up here. So for our sub menu, we got our navigation, unordered list, list item, and our sub unordered list. And we give the prefix of before. So this will now add a little element before our unordered list for us to start. So we're going to set the content to just empty. We don't need to worry about that. And now we're going to do our border. Oh, excuse me, throat's getting a bit dry. God, I haven't done this in a while. We're going to set our border style to solid, so we have a border, and we are going to set the border width to 0 pixels on one side and 9 pixels on the other 3 sides. Doing this would mean if we had a square and we made one side 0 pixels, we would then get a triangle. See? Simple. We've got a triangle. And now we want to add the colors. Now to do this, we're going to do border color, and we need to make sure that only one border is colored. If we did more than one border, we'll get something weird. In fact, I'll show you. If we do red, green, blue, and let's do olive. Why not? If we do that and then we refresh, you can't actually see it because we haven't positioned it yet, which is showing me that's just a terrible example. So I'll leave that there for the time being and then we'll come back to it later. So first things first, we need to actually get it in a position so we can see what the hell I'm talking about. So let's give it a width and a height of 0 first, just to make sure there's no actual box element, because you know borders go around the box. We don't want the box element there because then it would make our triangle look very not triangle shaped. So we're going to set the width and height to 0. We'll set the position to absolute. Oops. So we can actually position it somewhere. And let's set the left positioning to about 15 pixels and the top positioning to 5 pixels. Excellent. So now if I refresh, you can see we have our arrow there. It looks looking very weird. Let's set top to 0 for the time being. There we go. So that's what it looks like. So we've got rid of one border completely by setting its width to 0, and we have 3 borders left, each with a size of 9 pixels, which gives us our big triangle there. So if I got rid of all these, I set this to transparent, and we're going to leave the blue one there because that's the one we want for our blue arrow, which is the arrow that we want of our borders. Set this to transparent, and then we'll change the blue to a color which suits our theme, which is actually the same color as the background of our list items. And let's get rid of that spacing there, give it a refresh, and we have an arrow. But none of our sub items do. They don't have those arrows, so we'll add them in a moment. First thing I want to do, I've noticed this, there is no padding at the top of our first child, so it's going right up to the edge, which is not what we want. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to add padding top of 3 pixels. And we refresh. There we go, it looks a whole lot nicer. How awesome is that? Okay, now we're going to add our arrows for the submenus, which is very easy. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste all this down into our submenu, and to make sure we don't affect our submenu, to make sure we don't affect our submenu and we only affect the submenus, we need to add in all this again. So I'm just going to copy and paste all this over. So instead of going just to our submenu, we're going to our submenu. I'm sure that made sense for you. I hope it did. It made sense to me, mostly. Okay, now all we have to do here is change the positioning, which is very easy. We're going to set left to 0, so it's right on the left side, and we're going to set top to about 15 pixels, so it's 15 pixels down from the top. So it's essentially centered in the middle of our items here. So 15 pixels down from the top would center it right about here, which is good. So now if I refresh, actually, you can see our arrow's there, but it's pointing the wrong way. Now, there are a couple of different ways we can deal with this. We can, oops, sorry, hit my mic there. We can change the change which width we get rid of and which border we color in, or we can use some CSS3 transformations to rotate it. Now we're going to do that because that's a lot more fun and it involves me changing less code and getting myself confused. So we're going to do WebKit because I'm in the WebKit browser. This is essentially exactly the same for other browsers, except instead of the WebKit prefix you would use Moz or O or MS. I think MS for Microsoft browsers has transform. Microsoft has always been a bit behind on their browsers compared to other browsers. Internet Explorer, terrible browser for years until we got in IE9, which isn't too bad. It has most of the CSS3 stuff in it, and it's actually pioneering some stuff as well, which is cool. So anyway, we're going to go WebKit, and then we're going to transform, and we're going to rotate. You can see a load of CSS3 properties there. I'll probably do some videos in the future looking specifically at CSS3, but in the meantime we want to rotate it, and we're going to rotate it 270 degrees, just like that. So if we come back and refresh, yay! There it is. There is our rotated arrow. Everything is looking fancy. Now all that's left to do is when we hover over it, we want it to show up properly. So we're going to come back and we're going to go here, and we're going to add a couple of things in here. The first thing we're going to add is the ZEdIndex, and we're going to set that to -9999. Now the reason we're doing this instead of setting display to none, in fact, hang on, I'll talk about that later. First off, we're going to set the ZEdIndex to -9989. We're going to set the opacity to 0, and now I'm going to explain why we're doing it. So the reason we're setting ZEdIndex to minus blah, 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 is because we're setting the opacity to 0, but we're not setting the display to none. If we set the display to none, it wouldn't animate, it will just simply appear out of nowhere. Which is also the reason why we have this this content here, because we're floating our submenus right behind all of the content on our page. And if we didn't do that, when we hovered around our page, our submenus will just appear when we hovered over them, because they would still be there on our page. They'll be right where they are now, but in fact they are still going to be there right where they are now, but they're just going to be given an opacity of 0, so we can't actually see them. If we didn't set the ZEdIndex so far back, they would be there, and when we hovered over them, they would appear, which is not what we want. So we're sending them all the way back, so they're behind our div here, so we can't actually hover over them accidentally, because we'll always be hovered over the div, unless of course we hover over them, at which point we will change their ZEdIndex. Now see, that was a bit long-winded, sorry. I'm not very good at explaining that, but I'm sure you get the gist of it, and you will understand better when I've actually written the code in, which might help. Okay, so now I'm going to set the hover. So we're going to do nav, unordered list item, and on the hover list item we're going to get our unordered list, and we're going to first off set the set display to block. We don't really need to do this, but I'm doing it just in case. And then we're going to set the ZEdIndex to about 100, which is good because that will be above pretty much all your other floated items if you're using ZEndexes a lot. And we're going to set the opacity to 1. Okay, so now if I actually refresh, when we hover over, all our drop downs are showing. And if you saw just then, look, see? You wonder why it's happening there but not happening over here, and that's because if I inspect our div here, oops, sorry, I hit you again, I'm not freaking out. You will see that's 3 down. The menu actually falls out underneath our div area. So when we hover over that area, which is just below our div, the menu pops in, which is kind of unfortunate, but that's the only way we can work having CSS transitions and CSS animations for this, which is unfortunate, but hopefully they'll come up with something in the future where we can choose which order things happen, so then we could first set display to block and then change the opacity, which would be awesome, but unfortunately we're not that lucky as of yet. So now we actually want it to transition. So what we're going to do is over here we're going to set our WebKit transition. Of course this will work for Moz as well and all others probably. So WebKit -transition. I want that transition to last about 0.3 seconds, and we'll give it some easing of ease out. So now if I refresh, it's fading, yay, and they're all fading, which is awesome. But if we jump back here, you can see it animates its position a bit as well, and that's very simple. All we have to do here is change the position. So if we change, say, top to 80%, and then we add top in here so it knows to transition to about 95%. Oops. There we go, and we refresh, you can see it's animating. But look what's going on. No, why are you animating? Stop it. No, stop. Oh no, what are you doing? No, this is not what we want. This is not good. We only want the first sub. We want the sub menu, not the sub menus to animate. Gah. That's an easy fix. All we have to do is do the same down here. Just gotta move so you can see what I'm doing. So we're going to animate our sub menus as well. So dash web kit or dash moz or whatever browser you're using. You would, if you're doing this in a real website, you would have to do every single browser, but for the sake of time I am just doing WebKit because I'm using Chrome. Transition, and we'll do exactly the same, 0.3 seconds, ease out. Cool. So we need to give it something to ease out to, so we're of course going to have to add that into our list item, sub unordered menu, unordered list even, and get the hover for our sub menu or sub list. And get the child list of that, and again we'll just do display block, set the opacity because we have to add in all our transitions again just to be sure. ZEdIndex again to 100. Now we want to make sure top doesn't animate, so we're going to set top to 0, and we probably want to animate left as well, because if you remember in our example when we hovered over it, the first submenu actually drops down and the rest slide right a little bit, so we'll add that now. So we're going to change left to be about 90%, and then we'll change that to 100% on our hover state, just like that. So now if we refresh, that's a bit weird, I'm pretty sure that's just a browser bug, yeah. Strange. Okay, so now when we hover over, the sub menu drops down and our sub menus slide out. Excellent. You might be able to see there there's a slightly hasn't completely faded out, which is again CSS3, bit of a browser bug. That's unfortunate. I don't get it on PC, I only seem to get it on Mac at the moment, but there's not much we can do about that. Still, I think that looks pretty sweet. Yeah, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is a rather, apologies for the sort of muddled explanations there, but that is essentially how you make a CSS3 drop down menu. I've been Tam, I hope you have enjoyed. If you like, please subscribe or follow us on Facebook and Twitter, where we'll try and notify you of any live recordings we're doing, where you can actually interact with us, which is awesome, and ask us questions, which really helps us because then we can work out what people are confused about live and not have to trawl through comments, answering comments through text. We can actually explain right there and then. Anyway, I've been Tan, this has been Tootorials. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.